I think the first thing is that marketers are just starting to realize that they play a really key role in the customer experience because they're often the first experience that someone has with the brand. It's like the experience before the experience, right? If you think about how you've become aware of almost any brand, usually it's some piece of marketing or advertising. You see an ad on Facebook. Oh, I didn't know that they had these colored socks. I've never heard of Bombas before until I have because I saw a Facebook ad. So marketing is that first experience that people have, but also their role has really evolved into being the promisers of the experience because most marketing is telling you how you're going to feel when you do business with this company.
Hello and welcome back. It's the Modern Customer Podcast and I am your host, Blake Morgan. Today I'm recording this. It is August 31st. I know that because it's my daughter's 5th birthday tomorrow, September 1st. And we are getting her tons of rainbow and unicorn stuff for her birthday, as a 5-year-old would dream about. She started kindergarten 2 weeks ago, and there's just so many changes here from a personal perspective. It's kind of crazy. September is my busiest month in 2 years. I have an event I'm attending as an attendee, and then traveling to 2 events. We're also moving into a new house. All in 30 days. Plus, there's a baby that's now walking and my 5-year-old's birthday tomorrow. So when it rains, it pours, but I'll take it. I'm grateful, so grateful. And I hope all of you are grateful too, because even in the midst of chaos, we can always find things to focus on that are positive and that remind us we have so much more than sometimes we feel like we do. Today, my guest is Dan Gingiss. He's been on the show before. Dan is an international keynote speaker. He's a coach. He is a customer experience professional that has a 20-year career. He's had leadership positions at McDonald's, Discover, and Humana. He's the author of 2 books, including the newest book, The Experience Maker. His other book is Winning at Social Customer Care. The Experience Maker is available for pre-order now, and it's being released September 14th. So let's get to this special episode with Dan Gingiss. Dan, welcome back to the Modern Customer Podcast. I am so happy to have you back on the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing awesome. Thank you so much, Blake. It's great to be back and awesome to talk with you again.
And are you still in the Midwest? Have you been quarantined? Were you quarantining there? In Chicago?
Yes, I've been in Chicago and born and raised and still love it, although I do have some plans at some point when the kids go off to college to maybe move to warmer pastures. But for now, it's my home.
Sounds good. It sounds like a familiar story. Let's talk about where you've been the last 18 months, because you've had your business 3 years. Prior to that, you worked at awesome brands like Discover, McDonald's, Humana. Tell us what you've been focusing on for the last 18 months as we've all been hunkered down trying to wait this thing out.
Well, the good news is I now get to do what I love and what I'm passionate about every single day. And my joke to people is I love working for the Dan better than I liked working for the man, because I spent a long time. Yeah, I spent a long time working for the man, and it was good. I'm glad I did it. I got a great experience. But I am so much happier now. And actually, one of the things that I learned after 20 years in corporate America is how much I undervalued just being happy and positive mental health and just enjoying what I do every day. And I was so focused on rising the corporate ranks and, salaries and bonuses and all the things that you get wrapped up in when you're working for someone else. And now it's like, yeah, that stuff's still important. I want to get paid, of course, but I just love the fact that I get to wake up every day and do this. So what this is I'm a customer experience speaker and coach, and I love the coaching aspect. It's so fun for me because it's one-on-one versus like consulting where you're going into a company and really trying to execute projects. This is much more about, since my brand is the Experience Maker, it's about helping individuals become the experience maker at their business, and really helping them unpack, what does a CX role look like? How do we continue to get buy-in from the rest of the organization? What kinds of projects should we prioritize, et cetera? And so that part's been super fun. I love speaking. And then really the first thing I did when COVID hit, I first watched all of my speaking gigs drop off the calendar, as everybody else did. It was like the I equated it to, in the movies, like where an entire city loses power and you see it go boom, 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 like all the lights go out.
Yes.
That was our calendars. And so I sat down for the first about 8 weeks in March and April and wrote the majority of my book. I had been wanting to write it anyway, and I had a lot of it in my head, but I wasn't sure when I was going to do it, when I was going to fit it in. And I kind of could tell this was going to go on for a little while. So I spent about 8 weeks holed up doing almost nothing but writing the book. And certainly now, as we're launching it, I'm super excited that I did that. I also found that a lot of my clients were desperate for good content during the pandemic, and content that stood out because people had Zoom fatigue and didn't really want to attend yet another webinar. And so really trying to get creative around that. I created a customer experience game show with one of my clients. I created a couple of podcasts and just did some really interesting stuff, experimental stuff, if you will, that was fun. And I found that there's a lot of a demand for that. So that was this what kept me busy for the last year plus.
That sounds great. I was just thinking that I remember I met you maybe 5 years ago, 4.5, 5 years, when it was like one of my first speaking opportunities, which seems crazy to me. But it was at Social Media World. You were running the social customer service track. I don't remember how I got connected with you, but I felt like I had to audition for you to approve me to be on the track. And I was so nervous. I got my makeup and hair done, which is, to me now, seems ridiculous to do that for an event. I
remember you at that event, and you were terrific. And we met before that, though, because I knew of you. Which is why I asked you to be a part of it. But I'm trying to remember.
No, we never met.
Maybe not in person. We had
not in person
connected on social and what have you. But
yeah, no, not in person. And I'm so grateful to you, because that was like, when you first start and you need footage for your speaking reels. Yeah. Like without that and a couple other little tiny things that I did, I never would be where I am right now. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. I love being able to lift other people up, especially talented people who have a lot of important things to say. And I still follow all of your work and have read your books. And I find one of the things I love about the CX space is there is so much room for a lot of different voices, and that's growing too. It's becoming more diverse, which I love. There's just, I love curating other people's content as much as I love creating my own, because I learn from all the people around me. And so I love reading your stuff because I learned something, and maybe it inspires me to go think about a problem differently or what have you. And it's one of the things about this particular space where I find it very welcoming and open in that way. I've never had a CX person slam the door on me. It's always about collaboration and how can we help each other out and stuff. So I was happy to do that, and glad to see you have so much success.
So the last time we talked and I interviewed you, we talked a lot about your experience at McDonald's and those corporate jobs. Let's talk about what you've seen in the last 18 months with customer experience. From my perspective, I feel like we've seen some really fantastic transformations and amazing customer experience. And we've also seen some industries just fail to meet the customer where they are. What have you seen from your perch?
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. And for better or for worse, the pandemic shined a really bright light on customer experience and employee experience. And companies were either ready for it or they failed miserably. And I think it was very obvious which ones were doing really well and which ones were phoning it in. One of the first things that I noticed was from my corporate background, I used to sit in these business continuity planning meetings, and they were a joke. I mean, we'd all sit around a table and laugh about this big list of calamities that were supposedly going to happen to us. And I remember being in those meetings and talking about pandemics, and people would just chuckle and be like, yeah, that doesn't happen here. And and sadly, we talk about terrorist attacks, or we talk about, gunmen and all these things that could happen. But in the meetings, there wasn't a ton of seriousness to it because it felt like it could never happen. So one of the first things I realized was people's business continuity plans were thrown out the window by the end of March in 2020. I mean, they were garbage and they just weren't ready. And companies, organizations, restaurants, retailers, shopping centers, whatever, they weren't ready for their entire business to shut down. They didn't know how to handle that. And so a lot of it was kind of digging out of the proverbial rubble for a while and trying to figure out how to just get the lights back on. We also saw at the beginning something very similar to when all the privacy rules changed in Europe. We got tons and tons of emails from companies that were updating us on their cleaning procedures and referring us, at least in the United States, to the CDC. And it was like somebody sent out a templated email that every single company decided to pick up and use. And then I got an email from Charles Schwab, who I've been a customer of Charles Schwab since 1996. And their email did not mention the CDC or cleaning procedures at all. Their email said, "We know that you must be nervous about a volatile stock market. And so we've got all of these tools here for you to help you through these tumultuous times." And I was like, this is brilliant. This is exactly what I wanted from Charles Schwab. I don't care about their cleaning procedures. And so that's when, to me, it started becoming apparent that some companies just got it. They just understood that at a moment of need, we got to be there for our customers, and we got to be there in the way that they expect us to, and that, they look to us for. And I feel like what was going on for a long time was people were uncomfortable because they didn't know who to trust. They didn't trust the media. They didn't trust government. They didn't trust what was being told them. So they looked at the companies they do business with for that comfort. And some companies were there with open arms to help us when the chips were down. And some were just phoning it in with templated emails.
So many of us, Dan, had a complete shift in behaviors. The way we shop, the way we live, kids are at home, not at school. Were there any new habits that you formed during COVID that even now, well, we're not really post-COVID, but post-COVID, you would like to maintain?
The big one for me is curbside pickup. I actually, kind of in a nerdy way, love to grocery shop. I love pushing the cart around. I love seeing what's on the end caps, what's on sale, and all that sort of stuff. But as I moved to ordering ahead and curbside pickup, it became apparent to me that I was getting literally hours back in my weekend that I was normally spending grocery shopping. And I got to tell you, it's going to be really hard to go back to that. I don't want to go back to that. I want those hours. Now that I have them, I want to keep them. And I think that that's a great example of an experience that maybe didn't exist before. I don't know if my grocery store had curbside pickup in the past, but I certainly never used it. And now it's something that I think is absolutely here to stay. And I think it's a better experience than I had before.
Totally. Same. I really can't imagine enjoying. I mean, I like the discovery process of like a Trader Joe's. You can't purchase their groceries online. However, those of us with kids, life is so busy that now understanding how much more efficient it is to buy things online and pick them up, it's just beautiful. Like, how could we go back? I want to shift gears and talk about your book, The Experience Maker. I want to talk about one of your formulas called WISER, framework, I should say, the WISER method: witty, immersive, shareable, extraordinary, responsive. Can you describe the WISER method and maybe give an example of what it looks like?
Absolutely. So WISER is the method that I use to create remarkable experiences that customers want to share. And I'm very intentional about why I say it in that way, because as you know, most of my corporate career was in marketing. So I still have marketing in my blood. And that turns out to be fortuitous because so many organizations now are starting to put CX and even customer service underneath the CMO. And so marketing and customer experience are becoming closer and closer together. And it's my belief, having led marketing teams in almost every channel imaginable other than television, it's my belief that customer experience is the single best way to get people talking about us. It's not going to happen from a viral video unless you're extraordinarily lucky. And another email or social media campaign is just a yawner. But creating experiences that people want to talk about generates word of mouth, which is, by the way, the holy grail of marketing. It's what all marketers are looking for. So the Wiser framework essentially lays out how to do that. And you mentioned the letters. You don't have to use all of them. You can use one, but they kind of build on each other. And the best experiences have all of them. But something witty, for example, when I talk about witty, it's not about being hysterical or a stand-up comedian. There are a few brands out there, I'm thinking Taco Bell, Charmin, Wendy's, where we sort of expect them to be funny. But most of the people listening to your show now are not working for those brands. And they're thinking to themselves, yeah, we're not funny. We're actually in a boring industry. So witty is about being clever. It's using language to your advantage. And most importantly, it's about refusing to be boring. And I think if you take this attitude of we refuse to be boring into your experiences, and an experience, as we know, is any touch point. It could be any piece of communication between you and a customer. It doesn't have to be boring. And so witty and all the examples in the book show companies that have just decided to use language that maybe elicits a chuckle, maybe it just elicits a smile, maybe it's just a little bit different and therefore noticeable. I'm going to give you a great example that's actually not in the book because I always collect these. They show up every day. I was eating just this week a bag of Garrett's popcorn, and this is a Chicago staple. They have what's called the Chicago mix. It's a mix of caramel corn and cheese corn. Don't knock it. It's the most amazing thing you've never tasted. And on the back of their bag, it says "want more?" ? But they have crossed out the word "want" and replaced it with the word "need." And then it has their website. And I love it because, yeah, when you finish a bag of their popcorn, it's not just that you want more, you need it because it's highly addictive. And I just love that one little tweak to their packaging is what I would call witty because it's clever, it's different, it sort of stood out. Somebody reminded me the other day that companies are starting to use even the UPC symbols on their packaging. They're starting to like decorate them a little bit and have them not just be straight lines. Everything is a potential experience. And the examples in the book for all of the letters are, again, coming from my experience in corporate America, are simple, practical, and inexpensive. Because I know that if I give you something that is not those three things, you're going to have trouble getting legal approval. You're going to have trouble getting budget. You're going to have trouble convincing your boss. And so they're very intentionally simple examples so that people say, wow, we could totally do this. We could do this tomorrow.
When I worked in corporate America, which I also was a practitioner like you, and I prefer being my own boss to having a boss. But when I worked there, I had a tough time with marketing. I worked in customer service as a social media program manager. They really weren't interested in what we were doing at all, which was tough because I was brought in to be some kind of change agent. What are things that marketers don't understand about customer service and the contact center?
It's a great question. I think the first thing is that marketers are just starting to realize that they play a really key role in the customer experience because they're often the first experience that someone has with the brand. It's like the experience before the experience, right? If you think about how you've become aware of almost any brand, usually it's some piece of marketing or advertising. You see an ad on Facebook. Oh, I didn't know that they had these colored socks. You know, I've never heard of Bombas before until I have because I saw a Facebook ad. So marketing is that first experience that people have, but also their role has really evolved into being the promisers of the experience because most marketing is telling you how you're going to feel when you do business with this company, how you're going to feel when you wear these socks, or how you're going to feel when you try this new drink or whatever it is. And so marketers now have to make sure that they are not over-promising and having the company under-deliver. They got to make sure that they are setting the customer and the company up for success in terms of what they're promising. And I agree with you. I spent time on the marketing side, and there was often this a little bit, I don't want to say conflict, but maybe just not understanding each other with customer service. And specifically to there, I look at that as a feedback loop. And we use the word feedback loop, and what people often forget is a loop is circular, which means it has to go in both directions. So, for example, if I'm a marketer and I'm putting out a new campaign, and maybe let's say there's a promotion attached to it, and I don't let the customer service people know about it, well, we're going to get phone calls and emails and tweets and chats about this promotion, and our agents are going to fail at helping customers because they're not going to have any idea what the promotion's about. So that's the one direction. The other direction is as customer service starts hearing things about the business, responses and feedback from customers, and sometimes feedback about the marketing, they've got to give that back to the marketing department. We had a situation at one company I worked for. I'll let you pick which one just to protect the guilty. But we got a bunch of complaints about one of our TV ads. And it had been tested and we didn't see the complaints and tests. But once it was out in the marketplace, we got some very specific complaints in social media about a particular television commercial. Well, it's their job to bring that back to marketing to say, hey, we may want to relook at this ad or pull this ad and using that feedback. So to the extent that we can create that loop between customer service and marketing, it's a lot more effective. And the last thing I'll say on that is that like I said before, as these two parts of the organization are starting to come together in a lot of companies and the contact centers are starting to report up to CMOs, I think this is going to get better.
Are you seeing any friction as these departments get blended together increasingly?
Well, if the company is customer centric to begin with, I think there isn't friction. I think that, I often get asked, who's in charge of customer experience? Is it a CX team or is it everybody's job? And you know as well as I do, because you've been there in corporate America, anytime you make something everybody's job, it generally ends up nobody's job. So you do have to have a centralized CX area that kind of has that 30,000 foot view of the whole customer journey. But you also have to have a culture where everybody feels like customer experience is their job. Even the guy in finance that never talks to a customer, but is the person dealing with billing and payment methods and invoices and all that sort of thing, a lot of what they do affects the customer. So it might be indirect, but their job is still customer experience. And so the companies that get that and that have that right culture, I don't think there's really a lot of conflict. In fact, it actually makes sense that these two groups are together. It's the companies that are not that way and feel like just mushing everybody together in one team is going to solve it. And yeah, you're right. That's going to be a tough road to hoe.
Dan, if there is one key tip from your book, The Experience Maker, that you want all of our practitioners listening to consider, what would that one tip be?
It is definitely to become a customer of your own company. You have to do it. You have to become a customer. I was shocked when I first got to Discover that not every employee had a Discover card. And I made it my mission to try to get every employee a Discover card. How can you talk to people about it if you don't have one, right? I worked with people at McDonald's that don't eat fast food. What the heck are you working for McDonald's for if you don't eat fast food? Like, I tried everything on the menu because I wanted to know what everything tasted like. And I wanted to be, as I like to say, what do I like to say? I wanted to be, as I like to say, to know enough to be dangerous about anything. And so it's so important that you don't it's not just about stepping in the shoes of the customer. It's actually becoming a customer yourself, because you'll start to notice things when you're looking from the outside in. You will notice things that you can't possibly see when you're stuck looking inside out, because you're talking to programmers and developers and coders, and they're all telling you that the mobile app's great. And then you use the mobile app and you realize that like the menu's really complicated, or that you're tapping on something and it's not working. And yes, we got to listen to customers tell us these things, but when we're a customer ourselves, we notice it a lot faster.
I love that. I think that's so smart. And the best example is a restaurant, like you mentioned, McDonald's. Like, if you don't eat the food, how can you talk about it? And it seems like so many companies' employees are just checking the box or, what's the word? Just getting their card sheet time stamped. It's like they're just showing up. They don't feel like an owner. So, how do you get people to feel like an owner where they're eating the food?
Well, I think you welcome them in, and it's part of the hiring process and the training process. And, I think, and I, again, spent a lot of time at Discover trying to make this happen. The assumption should be that as soon as you become employed by Discover, like your next step, besides getting your computer and setting up your desk, is applying for a Discover card if you don't have one, right? Because that's one of the things we want you to do as an employee. And also, therefore, to enjoy all the benefits of being a Discover card holder so that you can understand it and be able to talk about it. I think we have so many people in call centers who are trying to provide technical support on websites that they've never been to. They're working off of documentation, but they've never actually been to the website. So let's say you're not a Discover card, and let's say that you are a SaaS company. I want you to give all of your customer service agents their own logins to your product so they can go in and touch it and feel it and use it themselves. So when they're explaining it to a customer, they actually know what they're talking about versus just reading off a script or some technical manual to try to solve problems. And we've all had it where we talk to a customer service agent and it is so clear that we, the customer, know more than the agent knows. And that's incredibly frustrating. But I think when we bring in our company to the experience, and we as part of the employee experience, we really ingrain people not just in the culture, but in the actual product or service that we offer. I think that's the piece that companies often miss.
Well, we've reached the end of our time together. I wanted to ask you a few questions that have nothing to do with customer experience. Are you game?
I am absolutely game. Hit me.
All right. Well, firstly, let's start off with just one resource or tool that you use in your own life for self-development or growth.
Well, I would say I have gotten onto a trend of every other book that I read, I switch off books between business books and fiction books. And I think both are equally important. So I love learning new things and helping to educate myself and grow my business. And I also love completely checking out with an awesome fiction book. And that's why I go back and forth. I don't have time to read two at once, but I go back and forth, and I would recommend that to anyone.
That's such great advice. I'm also a reader, love reading. Okay, question number 2, a little more fun. You're stuck on an island. You can only have one food and one drink. What are they?
Garrett's popcorn's probably really close
Right?
to the top of that list. I think I might go with it, with the Garrett's popcorn. And then I would have to wash it down with some really high-priced bourbon.
Nice. Okay, question number 3. What's your greatest joy?
Definitely watching my kids grow up. I know it's cliche, but mine are a little bit older than yours. I've now got 2 teenagers, and it is really, really fun for me to see them develop into young adults and to see what they're interested in and what they're passionate about. And I always kind of laugh. Like, my son goes to the same overnight camp I went to, and yet he does completely different activities than I did, right? But that's great, and I love that he found what he was excited about. So that is definitely a joy.
That's wonderful. I can't wait to see who my little people turn out to be. All right, next question. What's your most embarrassing work moment?
My most embarrassing work moment. Okay. So this is in business school. I was applying for a job, and I had an interview with Frito-Lay, and I wanted to be a brand manager at Frito-Lay. And they asked me a question that I just didn't see coming. They said, name a brand that you are extremely loyal to. And before my brain could tell my mouth to stop, I said Diet Coke. And of course, Frito-Lay is owned by Pepsi. So
Oh, no.
that was about the worst possible answer I could have given. And shockingly, Blake, I didn't get the job.
Oh my God. But what a great story for my podcast. So thank
Exactly.
you.
Yeah.
If you could have lunch with one person, dead or alive, who would it be?
I want to have lunch with Joe Madden, who is the former manager of the Chicago Cubs. He now manages the Angels. And he's in my book. I talk about one of his famous Maddenisms in baseball is do simple better. And it's about always running to first base hard, making the simple plays. When you do the simple things right, then you can afford to make a mistake on a tough play. And as with many of his other Maddenisms, I find that they have equal application to business. And I think do simple better is one of the best customer experience mantras that I've found. And so I would love to sit with him and talk about baseball and how I think that he could be a fantastic business consultant when he retires.
I love that so much. All right, next question. Who is the greatest band of all time?
Wow. I did not expect that one. That's a cool question. The greatest band of all time. Wow. And you didn't ask who my favorite artist is, because that's a different question. I'm going to go with Queen, because I think they really broke the mold and refused to be boring.
Love Queen. All right, lastly, if you had $1 billion, what would you do with it first?
I would make sure my kids go to college, and then I would use it to make the world a better place.
That is a very good answer. Dan, thank you so much for joining me for the Modern Customer Podcast. I always enjoy chatting with you, and I hope you'll come back in another little while. And I know we haven't talked in 5 years, so we'll have to do it faster than that.
Yes, we cannot wait this long between conversations. So I appreciate it, Blake. I appreciate you, and lots of success to you. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, everybody, pick up a copy of Dan's new book, The Experience Maker. And you've been listening to the Modern Customer Podcast. If you can, give me a review on iTunes. It helps more people find this show. And thank you. Until next time.